I am tired of the same people.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to another video. The weather is fantastic. As you guys saw, we just cleaned up the GTI, everything outside the wheels, because this is like the third time in the last like week and a half I've had to wash this car because we just had some birds that have decided to turn this car into their training drill for when they go to war against other birds. So the car has just been bombing ran repeatedly over the last few days, and I've had to rinse it off, I've had to clean it, I've had to do everything in between. And we also had some rainstorms earlier this week that made this car look absolutely terrible. And I am sick and tired of starting these videos and being like, forgive me guys, the car's dirty, or this, and that. So we went ahead and fully cleaned the car, and this paint is just glass. Like, I just genuinely love this car and how it looks and how the paint is and all that stuff. It's not without its faults. I think this car was oversprayed. You might not be able to see it on video. There's a pretty bad overspray line that when this car is really dirty, you can see. It's got a couple of little dings and scratches. So, I mean, I'm not saying this car is 100% perfect, because it does need a very, very minor paint correction. But just the car looks so great. I don't know many GTIs that are black, the paint still looks this good all these many years later without being extensively cared for. And I'm pretty prideful of how clean I keep this car and how good the condition I keep the paint. And so hopefully you guys found the time-lapse fun. I was using my new foam cannon, my Twinkle Star foam cannon, hooked up to my Portland pressure washer. I got this Harbor Freight a few weeks ago, but I've been running into a lot of issues because the factory foam cannon that came with it is low pressure and didn't foam the car up. So I picked up this Ryobi arm off Amazon. I'll link the video in the description if you guys want it. They got this little bit on it. It's got a quick disconnect. And then I got a hold of the Twinkle Star foam cannon, which functions as the new foam cannon. As you guys saw, it foamed the car fantastically, which is what I bought that pressure washer for. And I was really bummed out when I couldn't get it to work properly and actually foam the car when I first got it, but now it just looks fantastic. Of course, disregard the water dripping off the side there under the mirror. I'm sure you guys can see it. But today's video is not about how I clean this car and how good I keep the paint. Today we're going to talk about, should you buy a Mark 7 GTI? Now, obviously, I'm a bit biased. I'm going to tell you absolutely go buy one right now, but I'm going to tell you guys kind of the stuff that should give you a good recommendation, so to speak, to go pick one up, and the things to look out for when you're buying one from my experience. Now, obviously, more experienced GTI owners who've had these cars for years, comment down if there's anything I missed. So, why should you buy a Mark 7 GTI? First off, the styling. The car may look a little mundane compared to its competitors. You know, you throw the Veloster in the equation, for example. It's a very radical looking car. It's got a lot of aggressive aero bits. It's got a factory big spoiler on it, all that kind of stuff. And you know, obviously this car doesn't have that. It's a very mundane looking car. It looks very similar to a regular Golf. In fact, 9 times out of 10 when I pass a GTI on the road, I have to double take to make sure it wasn't just a regular 1.8 TSI Golf roaming around just looking the same as a GTI S with the factory halogens. Of course, this is a GTI S, but they're very mundane looking, but I like it because not being Superboy racer like a Type R, being kind of in the middle ground between, say, like an Audi A3 or an Audi S3, where you can barely tell it's anything that's not like super crazy, and being between like the Civic Type R side of things, it's a very good middle ground because the car does look very mundane. The really only way you can tell it's a GTI is the red stripe on the grille, red badges if you have the performance pack, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm a phony, those are fake. Those are badge skins, but the red side pieces and the red badge in the back, and of course the full True Dual exhaust. I say True Dual loosely because it's an inline 4. It's obviously not gonna have the True Dual like a V6 or V8. But it's a very mundane car in the grand scheme of things. You look at it, it's like, oh, it's a Golf. But it's just, that plays into the aesthetic. I mean, the GTI has never been really well known for being too exorbitant in the styling. It's always been very mundane and kind of just calm looking. It's never been like this very flashy car, like say a Civic Type R. Not to say anything's wrong with being flashy. The Civic Type R looks great, but if you're more into more just calm, I guess you could almost say grown up if you really want to go that far. I wouldn't, but if you want a more grown up looking car, the GTI is definitely the best of the group for that. The next thing is going to be the modability. Now, obviously, the GTI has been around since the late 70s, early 80s, and it's a platform that is very well loved, very well known, and the aftermarket is giant on not just the Mark 7, but GTIs in general. Mark 7s have so much you can do to them, and this car, for example, is an EQT Stage 2 car. I'm on the way to get a hold of a Garrett GT 2260S for this car, and we're going to push the 400 wheel. But these cars can make up to 350 on pump gas with just an intake, downpipe, and a tune. Now, most of the time, you're not going to hit 350 on pump. You're probably going to be around 320, 330 on the high end if you've done everything perfectly. Once you throw E30 or E85 into the equation, though, you'll get close to that 350, 360 mark on the stock turbo on an ethanol blend on a Stage 2 setup, which is very simple. Like I said, it's intake, downpipe, and the tune. They recommend the intercooler most of the time. I'm not running one right now, but I'm going to upgrade it whenever I do the Garrett on this car. Next thing is going to be your reliability. Now, obviously, it's German. At the end of the day, people are going to look at this and be like, oh, it's German, it's never going to be reliable, it's never going to do this. Obviously, when you're comparing it to cars, especially the GR Corolla or the Civic Type R, this car is not going to be able to live up to snuff. But Volkswagen has done a lot of things to make the Mark 7 the most reliable GTI ever made. And so far, it's been tried and true. I've seen many GTIs eclipse 150K, 170K, 200,000 miles. I think I even saw one recently with 230,000 miles, which for those who have been watching my channel for a long time, remember my old Sport Track that I had, topped out about 250, and that had already been through true transmissions and a bunch of other mechanical failures and was on the brink of death on the engine side. A lot of the cars I've seen can make it up there on stock everything, original factory parts, and these on top of that are modified and are tuned, some of which are even rolling big turbo at 160K and are just as reliable as the day they came off the factory assembly line. So I think out of all of the Volkswagen GTIs you can look at, this is probably the most reliable of the bunch. And I think that speaks to something. And obviously not without its flaws. And we're going to talk about in a minute the things to look out for when you're buying a GTI, and of course keeping up with maintaining a GTI, because being German, while the reliability is much better than the predecessors of this car, it is still playing on hard mode if you've never owned a German car. And I know that from experience. This is my very first German car. Only other car I've owned was domestic. And all of my friends drive JDM stuff and Japanese cars and Korean cars, like my friend Ron's Veloster N, which I want to do a head-to-head comparison of very soon, and just like styling and reliability and ownership experience and all that kind of stuff. My dad is pulling in, so let me just skedaddle out of the way and give him room to actually get into our garage, because I did not do a good job of doing that for him. But nonetheless, we'll talk about the ownership experience as well with this car. I talked about that already in another video, but this car is definitely a very good option. So, like I said, though, it is playing on hard mode. You're buying a German car. You're not going to have the cheaper cost of maintenance, but as well as just having to be more, what's the word I'm looking for, punctual with your maintenance. You don't want to just go like 30,000 miles without doing anything and just hope it runs like you can with some older Camrys or Corollas. This is definitely not your 90s Corolla or Camry in terms of just ease of maintenance and reliability, but it's a fantastic option. So the next thing we're going to do is your fuel economy. Now, out of the entirety of the hot hatch market, I think this gets the best gas mileage. I've seen more people claim to get in the 40s. This car has seen mid-30s on a highway trip. Volkswagen just really did a good thing in making these cars easy to make power out of, as well as fuel efficient. So that was actually the main reason I wanted to get one, outside of the fact that I driven a Mark 6. Went head over heels for it, as my daddy's walking in can remember, and I went head over heels for the Mark 6, had the money to get a Mark 7, got the Mark 7, and I'm not looking back. But the fuel economy, I mean, this car not only is fun, but it's got 4 doors, it's really practical. Sure, the back seats do mean you don't get a lot of trunk space, but at what cost? I mean, this car probably has the best legroom out of any of the hatchbacks I've been in the rear. Granted, I don't sit in the back often. I think I've done it maybe twice, but you know, it's got a lot of legroom and stuff like that for a hatch, which is why I think it's a really good option for families as well. Most people I've seen have families, have kids, they stuff them in the back of a GTI and they're great. And I grew up in the back of a hatchback, so I can tell you it's not that bad. So now we're going to talk about the kind of stuff to look out for, and I'm going to inject a lot of my ownership experience into this kind of stuff. Now we're going to start off with the flaws of a GTI. So obviously, like I said earlier, this car is probably the most reliable GTI that Volkswagen ever made, and it's got a lot of good going for it. It's got a really good engine, it's got really good DSG. It's like I think it's the DQ250, but I think it's the 3rd or 4th rendition of the DQ250. And so they've got it down pat on reliability in the DSG as long as you take good care of it. This car, like if you can't already guess, this car is also a DSG. The manuals do have their flaws. If you do upgraded flywheels on a pre-2016 or 2016 and older model, so you're in America, your 2015 and 16 model GTIs, there's a chance, and I'm saying this, take this with a grain of salt, you could completely like knock your engine. It's what they call crank walk. And I'm sure a lot of you guys who own manuals and both GTI and Golf R from the time period probably, hopefully, have never experienced it, but are aware of it. 2017, which is what this car is, they got it right and they finally fixed that issue with the, I think it's the CXCA engine code that is on this car. Apparently all 17s and up are in that code, to my understanding. It could be different once you get into the 7.5s, but that is kind of the main concern. If you're going to buy a pre-17 model manual GTI or Golf R specifically, be wary of doing lightweight flywheels, as it is something you run the risk on. It's very much like a crank hub on an S55 BMW. It's just something that's there. It's kind of blown beyond proportion. It's not a very common issue, but it is there, and it will get mechanic shops money out of it, out of fear. So the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be the water pump. It's the elephant in the room when it comes to Mark 7s. Most times when people talk about Mark 7s having reliability trouble, it is a water pump issue. This problem was such a big issue that it wound up turning into a class action lawsuit, and the water pump was extended. I don't remember the exact like circumstances you have to meet for that warranty on the water pump to be extended. I think it's like you have to have already had one replaced. I'm not entirely sure, but I know the warranty on it has been extended in some regard. I just don't know the exact terms. I'd look it up. I don't know the case number. I work in the legal system, but I don't know that case number. I know a lot of other case numbers, but not that one. But it is kind of the big elephant in the room, and it is fixable on your own, but it is kind of a nightmare. It is very difficult. It's very time consuming. It's something that if your car can meet the requirements for the warranty, take it to a dealer. Just absolutely. It is going to be costly. It's going to be costly if you don't have the warranty, take it to the dealer. But in my opinion, unless you're super mechanically inclined or just one of those people that just does not trust dealerships or shops, knock yourself out. But for me, if you got the warranty, take it to a dealer. I don't know if this car does. Thankfully, you know, this car hasn't had the water pump failure yet. It's been concerned, but it's not something that's happened just yet. The next thing to talk about is tuning, spark plugs, fuel injectors, all that good stuff. In terms of a flaw, there's not really a lot to worry about here. The main thing is going to be your coil grounds, the coil pack grounds, these little wires that are very frail and fragile. If you get a car that's pretty old, it's got a lot of miles, it's a risk you run of tearing these up. And it's really common for people to install a coil pack grounding kit. EQT, the company that tunes this car, sells one, and it's apparently really good. I haven't gotten it because this car has got just under 40K. I haven't had a reason to get that just yet, but a lot of people are doing that. So another thing that's become recent, and this is something that I feel like is only an issue if you don't take good care of your car, and that is going to be the magnet on the cam phaser. I believe it's the intake cam on this engine. So if you don't keep up with your oil, that magnet could fail and could pretty much wreak havoc and kill a camshaft on this car. And for those who have never researched how much it costs to replace an engine on a Mark 7, it's just extravagantly expensive. About $8,000, I believe, is the going rate for a brand new short block for a GTI motor. And that's not including what engine code yours runs specifically, because while it is the E888 Gen 3, there are multiple different variations of it, such as the CXCA, which is what I believe this car has. Everywhere I've gone online has pointed out the CXCA engine code on this car. But I also am aware of the DETA. I'm not sure what versions of the GTI had that engine, but I just know that some of them had it. That might be the 7.5, it might be the pre-17 model engines. I'm not entirely sure. But just be wary of your oil, because if obviously you're starving this thing of oil, because it is well known that Mark 7s do have a habit of consuming oil. And I think part of that is the PCV system, which I'll get into in a second. Just be wary of that. Keep your oil topped up if you are noticing oil consumption. This car has like very minor amounts of oil consumption. It's just kind of that Mark 7 thing. They all do it. Most German cars have a tendency to burn a little bit of oil. So just keep your oil up and you won't have to worry about that. So that's what I've been doing. I've been really keen on keeping the oil up. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the PCV system while we're on the topic of oil. This is a pretty just well-known issue on these cars, very minor thing, and it's mostly an issue in high horsepower cars. If you're running the factory PCV, there's a chance that it could send a lot of oil through it and into the check valve, into the N80 valve, and it just is responsible for gumming up things and running your engine out of oil. So just be wary of that when you're going big power. I think it is still an issue on stock power cars, but it's not as vicious of an issue like it is on high power cars. This car, like I said, is stage 2. It's running mid 300s on pump gas, and it hasn't been an issue for me yet that I've been noticing. There's not been any smoke out of the exhaust or anything like that. That's made me wary of such issues with the PCV. Easy way to fix this: just get a catch can and get an aftermarket PCV plate. I'm planning on doing that pretty soon on this car. I'm going to be getting an APR full catch can system. It's going to have a APR PCV plate on it, just to swap that out and knock that issue completely out of it and make one less issue possible on this car once it gets up in the higher mileage. I do plan to keep this car for a very long time and drive the wheels off of it. So in terms of the ownership experience, this car has been absolutely flawless. I think out of all of the hot hatches out there, I think I picked the best one for what I wanted. I wanted a car that was very modifiable, very fun, very dailyable, very good on gas, and available in a DCT, which knocks a lot of the options out the window just on the DCT alone. I mean, obviously the Type R is out of the running now. The STI is out of the running if you put it in the same category. Obviously Evos are a little bit too old for what I was looking for when I bought this car. That leaves really the Focus ST and RS are out of the window at that point. That pretty much leaves you with just this, the Golf R, the S3, and the Veloster N. There's really not a lot of options in the US once you go DCT only and in the hot hatch category. And I think this is probably the best option for what I had. Veloster Ns with DCTs are well into the high 20s, low 30s, and this car was in the low 20s with 28K on the clock. Sure, it's an S trim, it's a slick top, there's no sunroof, there's no gizmos and gadgets, it's got cloth seats, but it is the trademark plaid, and that's probably one of the best parts about this car. I had the halogen headlights when I first got it. It doesn't have auto lights on it at all. I mean, it's very basic trim for a GTI, but I think it's still a really good option. Like I said, it gets nearly 40 miles to the gallon on a good day, and it's very modifiable. It's well known these cars can handle over 500 horsepower in a stop block. I'm not going to push it that far because 500 horsepower in a front-wheel drive car to me is just pointless. I like having usability, and that's why 400 is kind of my cap, and as far as I'm willing to go. Even then, that's going to be pretty useless. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff you should know about getting a GTI. So at the end of the day, despite those tiny little issues that pretty much any car will have, there is no such thing as a perfect car. Every car has issues, and that goes for any model you can look at. And so, and the GTI, unfortunately, is no different. All of these cars here in my house have some sort of Achilles heel. That has transmission failure issues. Those have strut mount issues. Those have cam phaser issues. This has transmission issues. Like every car that exists is going to have an Achilles heel, and I think that going with this, there's not a lot that can go wrong. Obviously, that cam magnet on the cam side of things, on the intake cam, is something to be wary of, and just take care of it. Check your oil. Make sure you're doing your maintenance on time. If you have a DSG, do your DSG service at 40K. Just take good care of it, and it will take good care of you. That is all I can say about owning a GTI. So at the end of the day, would I recommend someone to buy one if you're in the market for a hot hatch? I definitely think that if you are already a GTI fan or you're aware of what they can do, get one, try one out, see if it's for you. Now obviously, if you're already in the mindset of I'm gonna get a Civic Type R or I'm gonna get a Veloster N, obviously I would say cross shop, give it a try. If it's not for you, it's not for you. Go get the other car you were looking at before. I did kind of that, except I was the opposite. I was dead set on getting a GTI, and I drove a couple other cars. I drove a Veloster N, my friend Ron's Veloster to be exact. I loved it to death, but at the end of the day, I still just loved this car just a tiny bit more, which is why I wanted to bring in one home. I've also experienced the Mark 6. I was looking into Civic Type Rs, which were going to be more expensive than this car was anyway, which is probably a good thing how I wound up with this car instead. And at the end of the day, I think I just picked the car that fit me best. This car is obviously a part of a brand that has a lot of heritage with me personally, and I think that's just in terms of that alone, that played a huge part in it. But for what I was looking for, which was reliability, fun, fast, daily driver with a DCT, and practicality, this car just fit the bill perfectly. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna wrap this video up here. If you did like this video, please sure to like and subscribe for more content coming soon on this car, as I've got tons of stuff just sitting, waiting to go on this car. I've got BMW M-style mirror caps to go on this car. I've got brakes on the way. We're finally getting rid of these crappy stock brakes that were on the car when I got it, and are chewed all the way up. For some reason, I thought it was a good idea to go to Tail the Dragon on these chewed up rotors. And then eventually I'm gonna be getting the APR catch can, and then we're gonna be saving up. I'm pretty much gonna put a halt on any cosmetics up outside of those mirror caps, because I do want to get this car set up for the Garrett GT2260S and the DO88 intercooler on this car I'm going to wind up getting for it later on in life. And yeah, go check out any of my previous videos if you want to see all the mods we've done to this car. It's a pretty extensive mod list, and I'm not really going to go over it again in this video, so be sure to go check it out and go follow all my other social medias, my Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. I will see you guys next time. Have a great day, guys, and yeah, hope you enjoyed. Go check out a GTI.